Do you think that has attuned you to this sort of thing? And actually, going through what you and the rest of the family have gone through, it's made you...
Prince William had been shaped from birth for a single destiny, the crown, every step of his life carefully mapped toward the moment he would one day become king, until a jaw-dropping announcement stunned the world into silence. In a decision no one expected, King Charles named a different successor. Not William, but his younger brother Harry, the very prince who had walked away from royal life years earlier. As the news broke, William sat frozen inside his home, staring ahead, barely breathing, unable to process what he had just heard. In a matter of seconds, everything he believed about his future collapsed. The path he'd trained for, sacrificed for, endured for, all of it shattered in one announcement. How could a father make a choice so devastating? And what would become of two brothers already torn apart by years of distance and resentment? The announcement didn't just shock Britain, it rattled the entire world. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when everything changed. Across the country, life moved normally. Children sat in classrooms, adults worked through their routines, pensioners poured afternoon tea. Then suddenly, every television screen flipped to the same image. Buckingham Palace filled the frame, the royal crest gleaming against deep red curtains. We interrupt this programme for an urgent announcement from His Majesty the King. Within seconds, the nation stopped moving. Phones were pulled from pockets. Office workers crowded around computer screens. In pubs, football matches were turned off without a single protest. Everyone felt it. Something serious was unfolding. Then King Charles appeared on screen, and the country collectively held its breath. He looked different, older somehow, though only months had passed since his last appearance. His face was pale, almost grey, and his hands trembled as he adjusted his papers. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They carried an emotion that made viewers uneasy. Sadness, fear, maybe both. "My dear people," he began, his voice quiet and strained. "I speak to you today with a heavy heart." Royal speeches usually felt distant and rehearsed, but not this one. This felt raw, painfully personal, like watching someone expose their deepest weakness to millions. He spoke slowly about his health, about private battles now impossible to hide, about doctors' advice and hard decisions forced into the open. His voice cracked, and he paused to steady himself. In that moment, he wasn't a king. He was an aging man facing his own mortality. And then he continued, "I must step back from active duty sooner than any of us had hoped." Viewers nodded sadly at their screens. It made sense. He was unwell. The natural order would follow. William would rise, exactly as he'd been prepared to do his entire life. But then Charles kept talking, and the tone shifted. "The question of succession weighs heavily on my mind," the king said, his voice suddenly firmer, more deliberate. "In these uncertain times, our monarchy needs someone who understands the modern world, someone who has walked away and chosen to return, someone who leads with his heart." Frowns spread across living rooms everywhere. That wasn't how people described William. And then Charles paused, drawing a shaky breath. "It is with deep conviction that I name my successor." 3 seconds passed, and then the words landed like a bomb. "My son, Prince Henry, the Duke of Sussex." For a few frozen seconds, the world stopped. Then chaos erupted. In the BBC control room, a producer dropped her coffee, the cup shattering across the floor. At the Times headquarters, a veteran royal correspondent whispered a word she'd never used on duty. Across homes from London to Edinburgh, people shouted at their screens, convinced they'd misheard. "Harry? Not William?" Charles continued speaking, words about compassion, healing, and the future, but hardly anyone heard them. Behind him, a royal aide turned ghost white. Another frantically typed messages off-screen. The cameras caught everything. The confusion, the panic, the sheer disbelief. "This cannot be happening." A woman in Manchester whispered the words to her empty kitchen. But at Adelaide Cottage in Windsor, Prince William sat rigid on the sofa. Catherine stood beside him, both hands pressed over her mouth. The children had already been sent upstairs when it became clear something serious was happening, and now the house sat in unbearable silence. Neither William nor Catherine spoke. William replayed the announcement again and again in his head, desperate for another meaning. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe ceremonial. but the language had been clear. Successor. Next monarch. His entire life had been built toward one role. Every lesson, every duty, every sacrifice. From birth, he'd been the heir, the future king. It wasn't something he chose. It was simply who he was. And now, in a few sentences, that identity had been stripped away. He's not, well, Catherine finally said, her voice uncertain. Maybe he's confused. Or the medication. Her words trailed off. William shook his head. His father had looked frail. Yes, but his words had been intentional. This wasn't confusion. This was a decision. Catherine reached for his hand, but William barely felt it. His thoughts were already racing toward Harry. The brother who left, who criticised the family publicly, who built a new life overseas, now set to become king instead of him. William stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at nothing. Within 10 minutes, every news outlet in the country switched to emergency coverage. Sky News pulled in constitutional experts who looked genuinely stunned. ITV assembled royal historians who repeated the same verdict: unprecedented, extraordinary. The Guardian's website crashed under the weight of traffic. On social media, the reaction was instant and explosive. King Harry trended worldwide within minutes, half the posts furious, the rest stunned. #Justice for William surged right behind it, filled with messages supporting the displaced prince. Was this guilt over Harry's departure? A desperate attempt to heal old wounds? Or had something happened behind palace walls that the public didn't know about? Before diving into the reasons King Charles chose Harry over William, one truth stood at the centre of it all: the king's hidden battle with illness. Charles had been unwell far longer than anyone realised. It began 3 years earlier with subtle signs: a cough that wouldn't fade, afternoons where exhaustion hit like a physical weight, forcing him to sit between engagements. Mornings became harder. Getting out of bed required effort, not just willpower. His private secretary noticed first. The king, once energetic despite his age, suddenly requested shorter schedules, fewer appearances, more rest. "Perhaps we should consult your physician, sir," the secretary suggested gently, after Charles excused himself from a meeting to catch his breath. "I'm perfectly fine," Charles insisted, though his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass. "Just tired? It's been a demanding year." But it wasn't just that year. The demands never slowed. State visits, garden parties, charity galas, military ceremonies, meetings with prime ministers and parliament. The role he'd waited 7 decades to assume was finally his, and he refused to step back. His doctors, however, were growing increasingly concerned. The public noticed small signs in photographs: strain, fatigue, stiffness, but didn't understand what they were seeing. Then came the diagnosis on a grey November morning. Charles sat in his private study at Clarence House, Camilla holding his hand as the doctor spoke carefully and gravely. The illness was serious, progressive, chronic, not something rest or medication alone could fix. "How long?" Charles asked quietly. The doctor hesitated. "With treatment, possibly years. But this will require major lifestyle changes, fewer engagements, less stress, proper rest." Charles stared out at the London skyline. He'd only just become king. His mother had reigned for 70 years, serving until the very end. "I won't hide away," he said firmly. "The people deserve a monarch who serves them." "Charles," Camilla said softly, fear thick in her voice, but he shook his head. He would continue. He would push through. He owed it to his mother's memory, to the crown, and to everyone who had waited alongside him for this role. Over the following months came treatments, discreet specialist visits, days managed by medication that left him foggy but functional, and nights when Camilla sat beside his bed, watching him sleep, terrified of what was coming. Still, he worked. Opening hospitals, meeting world leaders, hosting diplomatic receptions, sometimes gripping the podium during speeches just to stay upright, other times retreating to his private rooms and collapsing, completely drained. His staff quickly learned how to spot the warning signs. When Charles's face took on a certain pallor, schedules were quietly cleared. When his breathing sounded strained, appearances were shortened without debate. But there were limits to what they could shield him from, and Charles wouldn't allow himself to be hidden away. "My mother served until her final days," he told his private secretary after one especially brutal treatment, his voice firm despite the fatigue. "I can do no less." But unlike his mother, who had decades to leave her mark, Charles knew time wasn't on his side anymore. The clock was ticking loudly, and he felt every second of it. Queen Camilla carried the heaviest weight of all. She watched him push through each day, wanting to plead with him to stop, to rest, to slow down, knowing full well he wouldn't listen. In quiet moments, when he thought no one was watching, she'd catch him staring at portraits of his mother, studying them as if they might answer him back. "Do you think I've done enough?" he asked her one night, late, when the medication wasn't easing the pain the way it should. "You've done more than enough," Camilla replied softly. But they both knew he didn't truly believe it. He had lived in his mother's shadow for so long that even as king, he measured himself against a standard no one could meet. And with illness cutting short what should have been his defining years, he feared history would reduce him to a footnote, a brief pause between Queen Elizabeth and whoever came next. That fear haunted him more than the illness itself. Discussions about succession began 6 months before the public announcement, held behind closed doors where even trusted staff weren't allowed. Charles met with constitutional experts, with the Archbishop of Canterbury, with advisors who had served the crown for decades. The question sounded simple, but it was anything but. What happens next? Tradition answered quickly. William was the heir, always had been. Trained, prepared, steady, ready. The transition would be smooth, proper, expected, exactly how the monarchy liked it. But Charles couldn't stop thinking about Harry. His younger son had left in pain and anger, driven away by pressures Charles himself had once felt, but never properly confronted. And in that departure, something in the family shattered, a crack that widened with every year of silence and distance. "If I name Harry," Charles said during one late-night meeting with his most trusted advisor, his voice heavy, "it could heal what's been broken. Bring him home. Unite the family." He didn't finish the thought. "Before I leave this world. Before it's too late." "Your Majesty," the advisor replied carefully. "Prince William has prepared his entire life for this role." "I know," Charles said, and the weight behind those 2 words was crushing. He thought constantly about both his sons. William, loyal, disciplined, never once complaining about the burden placed on him from birth. Harry, emotional, wounded, choosing freedom over duty and paying dearly for it. As a father, Charles loved them equally. As a king, he owed the crown stability and tradition. The choice tore him apart. He lay awake night after night, running through every outcome. In his mind, William would be a good king, an excellent one, most likely. But would the monarchy keep drifting further from the people, locked inside rituals that no longer matched the modern world? Harry, for all his struggles, understood something different. He had lived outside the palace bubble. He had experienced life beyond guarded gates, connecting with everyday people in ways traditional royals rarely could. In his darkest moments, Charles wondered if Harry's return might actually save them all. The decision crystallized on a Wednesday afternoon after Charles collapsed during a private meeting. There was no drama, no sirens, no chaos, just sudden dizziness, a loss of balance, and Camilla's frightened cry as she rushed to catch him. The doctor arrived quickly. After a thorough exam, the verdict Charles had feared was delivered. The illness was progressing faster than expected. Months, perhaps a year or 2 with aggressive treatment, but not the several years they'd hoped for. Later, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, Charles felt mortality pressing down on him. He had waited so long for the crown, and now he was being forced to let it go. But he still had power over one thing. What came next? That evening, he asked for writing materials. His hand trembled as he began drafting the statement that would change everything, the words he would deliver to the nation. The choice he made wasn't driven by strategy alone. It was a father's decision, fueled by love, regret, and a desperate need to fix what had been broken. He chose Harry, not because William wasn't worthy, but because Charles believed this was his final chance to reunite his family. If Harry returned, if duty forced the brothers to stand together, maybe the wounds could finally heal. Maybe before time ran out, he could see his sons as brothers again. Not strangers. It was a gamble powered by love, guilt, and the brutal clarity that comes when death feels close. Whether it was the right choice, Charles couldn't know, but it was the only one his heart would allow. Behind palace walls, the Wales family had been quietly fighting their own battle. What the public never fully understood was just how much William and Catherine had endured. While cameras captured elegance and polished smiles, their private world had been unraveling piece by piece. It began with Catherine's diagnosis, words no one ever wants to hear, spoken in a sterile medical room heavy with fear. William held her hand as doctors explained treatments, timelines, possibilities. He nodded, asked calm questions, while his mind screamed that this couldn't be real. The treatments were relentless. There were days Catherine struggled to rise from bed, afternoons where she forced a smile for the family. William saw the exhaustion etched into her face. He took over routines, bedtime stories, school responsibilities, while still carrying royal duties that never paused, even as his life cracked apart. Their children sensed something was wrong, even if they couldn't fully understand it. William tried to keep life steady, shielding them as best he could. One night, a small, frightened voice asked a question that cut straight through him. William pulled them close, steadying his voice, promising everything would be okay, even as uncertainty gnawed at him. Their marriage was tested in ways neither had imagined. Fear and exhaustion sparked arguments, followed by instant regret. There were nights William found Catherine crying quietly, trying not to wake the household, and still, duty demanded he show up, smile, shake hands, give speeches. People remarked on how tired he looked, and he brushed it off smoothly. No one knew about the nights spent sitting beside his wife, the silent moments alone when emotion finally spilled out. Catherine fought with quiet strength, never seeking sympathy, never breaking in public. But William saw the toll every single day. Slowly, his world narrowed to three things: his wife, his family, and his duty. Succession wasn't even on his radar. It had always been there, yes, but distant, something for later. Right now, he was just surviving one day at a time. The public saw carefully staged appearances, smiles, unity, perfection. But behind it all, someone was watching closely. The king's justification for choosing Harry came during a meeting in his private study 3 weeks before the announcement. 5 trusted advisors sat in silence as Charles stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I know what you're thinking," he said quietly, not turning around, "that I've lost my judgment. That illness has clouded my mind." The room stayed silent. The tension was thick. "But hear me out," Charles continued, turning to face them. He looked worn, fragile, yet his eyes were sharp, unsettlingly clear. "William is an exceptional man. He will be a brilliant king. Someday. But not now. Not under these circumstances." One advisor leaned forward carefully. "Your Majesty, Prince William has prepared his entire life for this role." "I know," Charles said, pain cutting through his voice. "And that preparation has come at an extraordinary cost. Look at what he's carrying. Catherine's illness, 3 young children who need their father." Every eye seemed to be on him, every expectation pressing like a weight on his chest, relentless, suffocating, inescapable. And now, on top of all that, the crown itself loomed like an impossible burden. Charles moved toward his desk, leaning on it as if even standing straight demanded too much energy, as if the conversation alone was draining the last of his strength. "Harry has time," Charles said, trying to steady his voice with a calm he didn't fully feel. "His children are young, his wife is strong, and he has built a life that gave him clarity about what truly matters. He has lived outside the bubble," Charles gestured, first to himself, then to the room around him. "He understands people in ways that we, even we, sometimes forget how to." The Lord Chamberlain cleared his throat, careful, deliberate. "Your Majesty, Prince Harry left the royal family. He chose a different path." He paused, then added carefully, "And perhaps that is exactly why he is the right choice now." Charles countered immediately, his voice stronger, almost rising, more passionate. "The monarchy is fading, slowly perhaps, but fading all the same. We are seen as relics, disconnected from the real world. Harry understands the modern world. Charles pressed on, his tone sharper. Yes, he made mistakes, but he has learned. He has the emotional flexibility, the ability to adapt, to modernize, to connect with people in ways that tradition alone never could. Silence fell, heavy, oppressive. Finally, the Archbishop of Canterbury spoke, gentle but concerned. You are asking Prince Harry to give up the freedom he fought so hard to earn. Charles nodded slowly, jaw tight, throat working to keep it steady. I am. And it may be the cruelest thing I have ever done to either of my sons, he admitted, voice breaking slightly. But I believe this could save us all. Later that evening, Charles sat with his private secretary, reviewing the statement he had drafted carefully, word by word. This isn't just about the crown, Charles said, finger tracing the page. This is about bringing my son home. The secretary stayed silent, understanding that sometimes the king needed to speak more than he needed answers. Harry left because we failed him, Charles continued, voice low, shaking slightly. The institution failed him. I failed him. I watched him build a life across the ocean, away from everything he once knew. And part of me is proud of his courage, he added, pausing, emotion tightening his throat. But another part aches for what we lost. He stood and walked over to a photograph on his desk. Diana, young and radiant, holding both boys tucked under her arms. William and Harry were no more than 8 and 6, smiling at the camera with no idea of the heartbreak waiting for them. She had a gift, Charles said quietly. She could walk into a room full of people and make every single one feel truly seen. Not just acknowledged, he whispered, but truly seen, recognized, valued. Charles turned to face the room, voice steadying with conviction. Harry has that same gift. I have watched him work with veterans, sick children, people society often forgets. He has her compassion, her warmth, her ability to break down barriers in ways few others can. The secretary spoke cautiously. The public may not see it that way, sir, after everything that's happened. Then this is his chance to show them. Charles interrupted sharply, turning from the photograph. Yes, a chance to restore his image, but more importantly, it's a chance to fulfill the vision my mother had, a compassionate, connected monarchy. His voice rose. Don't you see? This could be Diana's legacy, realized through her son. Returning to his desk, Charles picked up the statement again. I am giving Harry something he never expected, he said, voice strong but tender. But I am also giving him the chance to come home. To heal what's broken, to prove that leaving wasn't rejection, but preparation for something far greater. Whether Harry would understand it that way remained uncertain. Yet Charles needed to believe that, beneath the hurt and distance, his younger son still longed for reconciliation. This was his way of offering it, wrapped in the unbearable weight of the crown, the heartbreak, and years of exile. The story of Prince Harry is one of love, loss, rebellion, and rediscovery. From the moment he walked behind his mother's coffin as a grieving 12-year-old boy, the world watched him grow under a merciless spotlight. Behind titles, appearances, and royal duties was a child shaped by grief and a man searching for meaning outside palace walls. When Princess Diana died, Harry's world shattered. Inside Balmoral's walls, he wrestled with emotions too big for his young heart. Sadness, confusion, anger that never fully faded. The image of him walking behind the coffin, holding back tears as millions watched, became a symbol of heartbreak that would never leave him. In the years that followed, he struggled to fit a royal mold that never suited him. Known as the Spare, his purpose always felt uncertain compared to William's destiny as future king. School offered no escape. Royal duties felt meaningless. Expectations to appear strong buried his grief deeper. Silence was demanded when he needed comfort the most. Harry longed for his mother's warmth, but the royal way demanded composure, a demand his heart could never fully obey. As he grew older, cracks appeared in his public image. The tabloids labelled him reckless, sensationalised every mistake. But behind the headlines was a young man desperate to escape shadows of duty and loss. Military service gave him purpose. In Afghanistan, he wasn't a prince. He was simply Captain Wales. For once, his worth came from his own skills, not his surname. But even that sense of normalcy was taken from him when his deployment was leaked. forcing his return home. Peace was denied even in his moments of service. Comparisons with William deepened his isolation. William settled into royal life while Harry struggled to find his place. Every relationship became a public spectacle. Every woman judged. The loneliness grew unbearable. Harry began to wonder if life beyond palace walls was the only way to breathe. Then came Meghan Markle, a woman unlike anyone he had ever known. Strong, empathetic, grounded, she understood public cruelty. With her, Harry felt seen, loved, whole, not for a title, but for who he was. Their wedding was a global celebration, a spark of hope and unity. But the fairy tale cracked quickly. British tabloids attacked her relentlessly, often cruel and racist. History repeated itself, and Harry saw patterns of his mother's suffering echo in real time. Determined to protect his family, he chose freedom over tradition. He and Meghan stepped back from royal duties, moving to California. Montecito offered peace. Harry became a father openly, walking with his children on the beach, living without cameras constantly tracking his every move. He spoke about mental health, built projects around compassion, and sought to redefine what royalty meant to him. Yet independence came with pain. His bond with William faded. Calls with King Charles became infrequent. In quiet moments, he missed his family deeply. Then came the call. The king was dying. Against all odds, Harry was summoned home, not as a rebellious prince, but as the son chosen to carry the crown. For Prince William, the days following the announcement blurred into disbelief. He went through the motions, breakfast with the children, reviewing briefings, responding to messages, but felt disconnected from it all, like watching someone else live his life. People kept asking if he was okay. Staff approached cautiously. Friends expressed sympathy that felt more like pity. He was no longer the future king. He was the brother passed over. "I don't understand," William said to Catherine one night, long after the children slept. "Everything I've done, every sacrifice, what was it for?" She had no answer. His entire identity had been built around one certainty: someday he would be king. The worst part was the public nature of it. If this had been private, something they could have worked through behind closed doors, maybe it would have hurt less. But the world had watched his father choose Harry. Opinions exploded, judgment rained down. Everyone seemed entitled to decide whether William was good enough, whether he had failed, whether this revealed some hidden flaw the public had never noticed. William remembered all the years of preparation that now felt pointless, sitting beside his grandmother at state occasions, learning to carry the weight of the crown with grace. The Queen had taken him under her wing early, giving him time his father never had. She taught him duty, sacrifice, and putting the nation before personal desire. He studied constitutional law, government intricacies, met prime ministers and world leaders. While others explored life, he studied, he learned, he prepared. And now, the crown he had been training for all his life felt like it had slipped away. But the skills, knowledge, and experience remained, ready for when the time would come. Every decision in William's life had been shadowed by the crown, shaping him long before he even knew the weight of what it would mean to rule. Every university choice, every military assignment, every public appearance, even the woman he chose to marry, all had been quietly measured against the future he was destined to inherit. Not that Catherine was ever a calculated choice, but he had always been acutely aware that his wife would one day stand beside him as queen consort, a partner in a duty-laden life that had no room for error. That responsibility had moulded every step he took. Harry, by contrast, had the freedom to rebel, to stumble, to discover himself through mistakes and life experiences. William had never had that liberty. He had been the heir, the one who stayed, the brother who carried the burden when others walked away. And yet, that preparation, years of study, practice, sacrifice, was now tied to a role that no longer belonged to him. The public had always painted them as polar opposites: steady, composed William, and wild, impulsive Harry, the dutiful heir and the reckless spare. William had accepted that narrative, had even quietly taken pride in it. He had believed that dedication, consistency, and selfless service would count for something in the end. Yet, after the announcement, He was forced to confront the painful truth. He had been wrong. His first public appearance following the shocking news was at a veterans' charity event he had committed to months earlier. He had considered cancelling, every instinct screaming to hide, to avoid the relentless cameras, the intrusive questions, the barely concealed pity. Catherine, as always, was the voice of reason and calm. Backing out will only feed the media frenzy, she reminded him gently. So he went. He smiled. He shook hands. He made polite small talk as though his world hadn't just collapsed around him. Reporters circled like sharks, shouting questions about his father's decision, about Harry, about how he felt being passed over. William ignored them all, maintaining the composed, practiced expression he had perfected over decades of service and sacrifice. "You were brilliant," Catherine told him afterward quietly, in the car heading home. William stared out the window, words caught in his throat. "I felt like a fraud," he admitted. She shook her head gently. "You're not. You're showing George, Charlotte, and Louis how to face disappointment with dignity. That matters more than any crown." He wanted to believe her. But late at night, when the children slept and Catherine had finally drifted off after another exhausting day, William lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the full weight of everything pressing down on him. He'd lost friends, the few he truly trusted. They tried to offer support, but what could anyone say? This wasn't a setback that could be solved with a pep talk, a night out, or reassurances. His entire future had been rewritten without consent. Through it all, Catherine remained his anchor, steady, silent, unwavering. She never told him how to feel, never urged him to move on too quickly. She simply held space for his grief, his anger, his confusion. Yet, he could see the worry etched in her face, the fear that this betrayal might break something fundamental in him. For the children's sake, he kept himself together. George, old enough to sense tension, didn't understand fully, but William refused to burden him with adult problems, refused to let his pain poison their childhood. Still, the composure was exhausting, relentless, consuming. Every day became a performance with no end in sight. The press delighted in turning it into a story of sibling rivalry. The Crown divide became the headline du jour. Endless speculation about William's feelings, Harry's return, and the legitimacy of either brother's role dominated newspapers, television, and social media alike. Images were juxtaposed side by side, William, stoic and resolute, Harry, laughing, relaxed, half a world away in California. The implicit message was unmistakable. One brother grounded, dutiful, tied to tradition, the other free, modern, a prodigal son suddenly elevated. William tried to ignore it, but the coverage was omnipresent. Opinion pieces argued he was too cautious, too burdened, too weighted by personal pain to lead effectively. Others defended him passionately, insisting his steadfast dedication deserved recognition, that Harry had not earned what now seemed inevitable. Team William versus Team Harry erupted across social media, fueling public debates and even family conversations. The brothers had not spoken since before the announcement. What would William even say to Harry if he saw him? "Congratulations on taking my birthright. Thanks for returning to claim what I've prepared for my entire life." The silence between them now felt heavier than distance alone. It was active avoidance, a chasm filled with hurt, rivalry, and unspoken resentments. This wasn't about public opinion or media narratives. This was about the Crown itself, about their father's love, about which path had been right all along. William told himself he would move forward with dignity, that he could bear this burden. But in quiet moments, he couldn't escape the gnawing ache in his chest. Could he ever forgive Harry? Could he forgive his father for the choice that had upended his life? The call came at dawn in California, jolting Harry from restless sleep. It was the King's private secretary, voice tight with urgency. "His Majesty requests your presence in London immediately, if possible." Harry sat up, heart racing. Meghan stirred beside him, eyes wide in the dim light. He couldn't find words. "His Majesty is stable," the secretary continued, "but there are urgent matters requiring your attention. Family matters." 24 hours later, Harry stepped off the plane at Heathrow, England. Grey drizzle fell, oddly comforting in its familiarity. A car whisked him to Windsor, passing reporters already gathering, passing protesters holding signs, some in support, some critical. He had left this world behind, created a life, found peace, convinced he'd never return. Yet now, he was being called back, not as the spare, not as the prodigal son, but as the future king. The weight of it pressed down relentlessly during the drive. Freedom, privacy, the right to live authentically, all of it would vanish if he accepted. But how could he refuse a dying father? Megan held him before he left, eyes full of concern. "Whatever you decide," she whispered, "I'm with you, but make sure it's what you want, not what you think you owe them." Harry wasn't sure he knew the difference anymore. William waited in the oak room. When Harry arrived, they faced each other, years of hurt and distance hanging thick in the air. Harry noticed the fatigue etched into William's face, the weight of recent events carved into every line. "Hello, William," Harry said softly. "Harry?" William's voice cracked, formal yet strained. "Why are you here? Haven't you taken enough?" William's words cut, but Harry understood the pain beneath them. "I didn't ask for this," Harry said. "I didn't want this, didn't you?" William stepped closer, anger and anguish mingling. "You left, spoke against us publicly, built your perfect life in California while I stayed, carried the work, and somehow you're rewarded with the crown. How is that fair?" "It's not fair," Harry admitted, voice breaking. "None of this is fair to you, I know." William turned away, struggling to contain himself. "Do you have any idea what it feels like? My entire life has been about preparing for this role. Every choice, every sacrifice. Catherine has been through hell while I held it together, and Father looks at all of that and decides I'm not enough. That's not what this is about, is it?" William spun. "Then what is it about, Harry? Why you and not me?" Harry had no answer. Words would fail. Explanations would only sound like excuses or insults. Silence stretched, heavy with everything left unsaid. Finally, William's shoulders sagged. "I don't want to hate you," he whispered, "but I don't know how not to. Right now." "I understand," Harry replied. "If I were you, I'd hate me too." They stood, two brothers once inseparable, now strangers, bound only by blood and circumstance. Harry thought of their childhood, of walking behind their mother's coffin, of all the moments they had needed each other and somehow forgotten. "I never wanted to take what was yours," Harry said. "Finally, I need you to know that." William searched his brother's eyes, seeking truth, some sign that this nightmare might yet end without destroying everything. Later that evening, Harry met Charles in the private study. The king looked frailer than ever. "You wanted to heal the family," Harry said, after tense pleasantries. "But this isn't healing. It's tearing us further apart." "Harry, I can't accept the throne," Charles said. "It belongs to William," Harry continued, voice steady despite the churn of emotion. "It always has. You know that, Father. Deep down, you know that's right." "The monarchy needs stability," Charles whispered, voice cracking. "It needs William," Harry interrupted gently. "The one prepared his whole life, respected, dedicated, the right person to serve the people. Not me." Charles's eyes filled with tears. "I wanted to bring you home." "I know," Harry said, kneeling beside his father's chair. "And maybe this is how, not by giving me the crown, but letting me stand beside him instead of in his place. Let me come home as his brother, not his replacement." The king gazed at Harry, seeing perhaps for the first time how deeply he understood sacrifice. "Are you certain?" Charles asked. Harry thought of Megan, of their children, of the life he had built. Accepting the crown would erase all of it. Declining, supporting William instead, felt like the first truly free choice he had made in years. "I'm certain," Harry replied. "The crown belongs to the one born to carry it. That was never me." News reached William that evening. He sat in stunned silence as the secretary explained Harry had declined, insisted William be named successor, and requested that they work forward as brothers rather than rivals. "He did that?" William whispered. "Yes, sir," came the quiet reply. He was adamant. Something shifted in William's chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. Harry had given up something many would have seized simply because it wasn't rightfully his. The brothers met again the next morning, no anger crackling this time, just cautious, tentative steps toward reconciliation. "Thank you," William said simply. "Don't thank me for not taking your birthright," Harry replied. "That's not how this works. You could have." William insisted. Many would have. They walked together through Windsor Gardens, neither fully comfortable, neither hostile, slowly rediscovering a semblance of brotherhood. That afternoon, when they visited their father together, Charles wept openly, health failing, but his face carried a peace that had eluded him for decades. "My boys," he whispered softly, "together again." It was far from perfect. Wounds remained, scars yet to heal, mistrust lingering. But for a dying king who had watched his sons drift apart, it was enough. A beginning. A fragile, beautiful beginning. Likes, subscribes, shares, comment. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the royal family's most intimate struggles, hit that heart and share your thoughts below.